Good. Well, it's my job to welcome you here today to Watson, Farley and Williams, the energy transport and infrastructure law firm. And here we're going to be hearing a lot about the infrastructure and construction sector, featuring one of our key infrastructure partners, Theresa. So really interested to hear from the panelists. And thank you for allowing us to host you. I'm really excited about the conversation. Don't want to hold it up, so over to you guys.
Thank you very much. Right, can everybody hear? Yeah. Excellent, great. Well, let me introduce myself first. So my name's Annette Nabavi. I'm a board director here at Women in Telecoms and Technology. And obviously on behalf of WiTT, I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. So we're really pleased about that. I think we've also got some online participants, so we'd also like to welcome them. And we've got a couple of other WiTT board members here tonight. Audrey, who's driving some of the tech at the back, and Yasmin, who you would have met as you came in. The board has a couple of other members who couldn't come tonight, Michelle Senecal and Helen Kaliski. So the event will last for about an hour, something like that. And we'll try and ensure there's time at the end for questions. There will then be further drinks and lots more canopies, I understand. So now hold yourself for those. Just a word about my background before I introduce the panel. I'm currently a non-exec director on the board of a couple of AIM-listed companies, namely IAMART, which is a secure cloud managed services company, and Eleco, and a number of my Eleco colleagues are here tonight, I'm delighted, which is a software company providing software solutions for the built environment. So do make sure you get to chat to them at some stage. We particularly focus on the areas of scheduling, planning, and maintenance, smart maintenance. So prior to going plural, with several NED jobs, I was a strategy consultant and also an investment banker for my sins, specializing in telecoms and technology. So that's a bit about me. I'm going to try and keep the panel a little bit under control, but apart from that, that's more or less all you'll hear from me. But I just want to mention Eleco being particularly important in the context of this panel, because it's actually my work with Eleco which has inspired me to promote the idea of putting together a panel of women to look at the technologies being used in the construction industry and the built environment more broadly. And often the construction industry, the built environment, is seen as a very blokey sort of tech area. You can see from the layout we have here that that's not entirely true. So that's really nice. We always try and put on panels with which feature women, because we want to show that we can really do things. So I just wanted to very briefly categorize what I see as the technology trends in construction. Thank you, AI, for providing me with some information. The first it suggested was digitalization, things like BIM, if you know what that is, AI, digital twins, Internet of Things, AR, VR, all to do with smarter planning and execution. The second that it suggested was automation, so robots, drones, autonomous vehicles, and that's all about combating labor shortages and boosting efficiency. And then the third area that it mentioned was advanced materials and methods, so modular and offsite construction, 3D printing, sustainable materials. And what's really interesting is that the panel tonight spans all three of those areas that were suggested to me by AI. The construction industry has been a bit slow in really embracing technology, but I think there's a lot of progress being made, a lot of really interesting smaller companies, and some very big initiatives as well, trying to pull all of the data that is generated by the construction of a building or the maintenance of a building together to make sense of it, not just at the time, but over time. So I'm going to quickly introduce the speakers, but before I do that, I just wanted to thank Watson Farley Williams for hosting us tonight. It was really, really kind. We do rely on some of our members, corporate members, to help us out, and they always do. We always end up with nice venues to come to. So thank you very much for filling in that role for us. So the formidable panel that we have tonight, I'll just introduce briefly. So we've got Brittany, hang on, where we are, Brittany Harris, who's the co-founder and CEO of Qflow. Qflow, is that correct? Yes, it is. Sakthy Selvakumaran, that way, founder and CEO of BKwai. BKwai, then we got that right, there we go. Lyons, Lucy's there, exactly.
We're making this up.
It's good, isn't it? Co-founder and CEO of Kestrix, and Chloe, co-founder and managing director of Natural Building Systems, and last but not least, Theresa Mohamed, who's a partner here at Watson Farley Williams. So I'm going to ask each of Brittany, Sakthy, Lucy, and Chloe to spend 5 minutes, a little bit more maybe, telling us about their businesses, because each of them is running a really interesting business with a different angle on technology. And talking a little bit about the technology that's behind it, the problems it's trying to solve. And then I'm going to ask Theresa to give us some insights into the sort of issues that she has to deal with, the sharp end of the construction industry, and also how technology might help to avoid some of those disputes. We'll have a little think about how the construction industry is likely to evolve from a technology point of view, and then I'm going to invite questions from the floor, and hopefully we'll get through that in time for some more drinks, so that'll be good. So if I could start with Brittany, whose business touches on a range of technology points, including AI, data analytics, sustainability. Over to you, Brittany, and you've got the clicker, that's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, hi everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. So yes, I'm Brittany. I'm co-founder and CEO of Qflow. We work with construction to help them track all the materials coming onto site and the waste going off. So my background's civil engineering. I started my career at the design end, spending all this time trying to diligently make these projects sustainable and efficient and safe and all this fun stuff. And then releasing them to the contractors and assuming they build what we set out. Knowing, obviously, that that's not exactly what happens, it then goes through what's called value engineering, which in reality is sort of make it cheaper, make it easier to build, which often means that a lot of those benefits and some of the really important bits get lost along the way. And then you go on to the next step and you actually go to buy the things like the materials and hire the staff to do it. And things change again. You get last minute substitutions. At the moment, we're seeing a really high amount of material price inflation, which means that last minute material subsidies are incredibly high, which is putting people's lives at risk because you're not necessarily meeting the fire safety standards. You're putting operational efficiency at risk because things don't match up. And so there's this really interesting sort of gap that forms between each stage of the construction process, which causes all these problems, both from a cost perspective, costs run out of control, programs go crazy, but also compromise the safety and the sustainability of our buildings. So what Qflow is doing is tracking all those materials and making sure that they're right. Now, some terrifying stats is that materials mismanagement accounts for about 30% of rework in construction. And there's a fantastic organization called the Get It Right Initiative who's been digging into this a lot. But it's also one of these really, really lost parts of the industry. But the reality is you can't manage what you can't measure. And the tracking and managing materials in construction is incredibly complex and manual. They have thousands of deliveries, sometimes hundreds a day that they have to deal with. And it is not humanly possible to check all of those and verify that they meet the design and the specs. But technology, on the other hand, is very scalable and can do that. So we focus on capturing accurately the actual what materials are coming onto site and what waste is going off and getting that into the hands of the people who need it. So that's quality control teams. Is it the right material? It's cost control teams. Are we paying for what we've actually been invoiced for? Terrifyingly, often they're invoiced for something that's not even on site. And it's just this sort of mad trying to claw money forward from the supply chain because it runs on such tight margins. And then finally, what was the actual carbon footprint of this material? Does it actually meet the sustainability spec that we set forward, or has it been sneakily substituted last minute? So the way that we do that is we very simply capture the data as it comes on site. So one thing that we've super focused in on is ease of use. So the site teams just have to take a photograph. They take a photograph of the goods received note that comes on with the materials and the waste transfer note that goes off. We then use the wizardry of AI. There's lots that goes behind it, but long and short of it, it digitizes the data, it structures the data, it cleans it because it's terrifyingly unstructured and inconsistent. Travis Perkins, big supplier, they name themselves about 12 different ways on their delivery slips. So if you want to know how much has come from Travis Perkins, good luck. So we've built all these processes to try and clean and structure that data. And then we also fill the gaps. So we say, it's missing volumes, it's missing quantities. How can we start calculating some of that and actually making it usable and useful? We then also push that data into other systems like Autodesk and Procore, or One-Click LCA or EC3 if you're doing carbon estimations, so that you can actually tie that back into your design specs and understand what was the true impact and what did we actually build, not just what did we say we'd build. So what that means for project teams is a really detailed record of what actually came on the site. You've got transparency across your supply chain, potentially across multiple projects, so you can really see the distribution of where your material is coming from and where your waste is going to. And then you've got these real-time alerts, so you're able to proactively manage that risk as it comes through, not retrospectively realize it at the end of the project, or more terrifyingly, 2 years after the project's been complete and gone, oh crap, the wall's just fallen down. So actually you can do that before something's gone horribly wrong. So our sort of top 3 learnings from the last 8 years of doing this is 1, simplicity is key. If it's not simple, it won't survive construction. It's that simple. Trust relies on quality, and we've spent so much time trying to make sure that the quality of our data is high so that people can believe in it, they can rely on it, and they can take informed decisions off the back of it. And actually, I think this is one of the really interesting challenges and evolutions with AI is that garbage in, garbage out. If you put crap data into AI, you cannot trust what it's producing. And so really high trust in the data and high quality in the data that you've got is critical to even be able to leverage AI. And then finally, I was chatting to an EcoSoft team about this earlier. Ecosystems and connectivity is so key for our industry to actually thrive on this. If you're trying to operate in a silo, if you're keeping your value just to yourself, ultimately it's not going to scale and you're not going to get those multiplier effects that you can if you integrate and share that data across the industry. So we focus a lot on that connectivity piece. That was it from me.
Fantastic, thank you. That's a really great gallop through all the things that you do. So well done. We're now going to turn to Sakthy, that way. Get it right soon, won't I? Whose business takes us into the world of sensors, satellites, AI, asset management, and probably an awful lot that I've left out. So over to you.
Great. Do I have slides?
I don't think you do.
So. No,
I don't think you do.
Give this back then.
Thank you.
So my name is Sakthy, and as you know, I'm the founder and CEO of this company called BKwai. So I similarly started my life in industry, and I worked in the design of civil infrastructure, getting it built, inspections, asset management, all sorts of bits and pieces. Primarily bridges, tunnels, road, rail, anything, transport, water, buildings, everything, you name it. And then, interestingly, I went back into academia quite late in my career and did a PhD. Now, the PhD was meant to be on one thing, but then I got distracted because I learned that there are some satellites about 500 kilometers up in space that can measure millimeter scale movement on the ground. And I thought, surely not. And the fun of a PhD is that someone gives you time to go and explore that. And so I very quickly started developing a PhD, which made use of radar satellites that could measure these millimeter scale movements and spot potential problems, say, a bridge not behaving properly or unexpected tunnel settlement. And so you end up basically getting these maps of radar measurements. So even this building will have hundreds of measurement points, and we can see whether it's, say, settling on one side, which then unleashes a whole realm of fun, potential risk and also litigation related issues. I then started looking at combining those two sides together and outspun BKwai as a spin out from the University of Cambridge. And effectively what BKwai does is it takes data from a variety of different sources. That could be some of these satellites that we were looking at, other forms of satellite data, sensors, environmental data sources, project plans, a whole bunch of things together, puts that all together and tells you something about the risk of your asset. So the kinds of things we might do, for example, are we actually started our company on Thames Tideway. where the construction team were quite interested in understanding their risk working underground. So they had a scenario where they were working in Falkenberg pumping station, and they basically were putting a lot of plant, a lot of equipment down into a hole, which occasionally flooded. When water started coming in, it took 20 minutes to flood this chamber that everyone was working in. So Tideway said, that's quite a big risk for both our people and our equipment. And so what BKwai did was take a few sensors worth of weir data, and then we pulled in lots of environmental data from various different open stations that were around central London, pulled that together and basically built forecasts for them so that they could kind of plan work days in advance, and say like, okay, these are the high risk days, and plan their schedules around that. And so we started in construction doing more and more projects like Everton Stadium, where we were looking at the risk of building a brand new stadium around heritage walls, and various other construction projects. And now we focus a lot more on asset management, so looking at existing assets. So working with people like National Highways, we do things like make use of this historic radar data. So I don't know how much you know about how we manage our assets, but it's predominantly periodic and it's predominantly visual inspection. So every so often someone will stand around, I know because I've done this, I will stand in a cherry picker and I will look at something and I'll say, that looks okay, I think. And if you're lucky, there's some inspection records, or occasionally someone will say, oh, we actually lost the inspection record. So while you're there, why don't you just measure it up and we'll see how we go, which is a ludicrous way to manage existing infrastructure assets. And so it becomes quite interesting when you think, okay, these satellites, not only are they collecting all this interesting data, but they go back in time. So what we can now do is pull 10 years worth of satellite data and say, okay, actually, National Highways, this structure that you're a little bit worried about, we can pull out 10 years worth of data on how it's been moving for the past 10 years. We can pull in the environmental data about the temperature, the tide, all these other environmental variables. And we, using a little bit of AI magic, can tell you a little bit about whether that's normal behavior, whether that's unusual behavior, strip back certain environmental effects and say, like, what is the underlying behavior here? And so National Highways used us to keep a strategic bridge open on the A34 for 2 years until their kind of planned maintenance intervention. Similarly, we do things with quite a lot of companies that are interested in extending their lifespan without spending too much money. So effectively trying to show that structures are behaving in certain ways and provide an evidence base so that when they do hand back for, say, we've been operating this for the past 15 years, here's why it's okay, and here's why it's safe that we made certain XYZ decisions in the maintenance. And so that's a little bit about what we do.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I'm really two most amazing businesses here. So we're now going to move on to Lucy, whose businesses uses drones to gather data on heat loss in buildings. And they construct what Lucy calls the Google Maps of heat loss. I think is correct, is it not?
You got it right there on the screen. Thank you. So yes, hi everyone. Really nice to be here. I'm Lucy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kestrix. And we are flying thermal imaging drones over buildings and using AI to map and quantify how heat is escaping from the building envelope, and then generate retrofit plans for buildings. So we have a massive infrastructure challenge on our hands here in Europe. So every year, more than 100 billion euros in value is lost due to heat leaking from poorly insulated buildings. Now, to solve this problem, just in the UK, we need to retrofit or insulate and energy upgrade more than 1.8 homes every single minute between now and 2050. But there's a problem. There's a lot of problems, but one of them has to do with data. So that's right. There's basically no scalable system around to measure real home heat loss in a way that's reliable and scalable. And as you can imagine, this leads to lots of bottlenecks in the delivery of retrofit projects. So if you take it from one of our first customers, Peabody, they're one of the largest social housing providers in the UK. The energy efficiency data that they have, so this is the lodged EPC or energy performance certificate system, is basically not reliable enough to plan or validate retrofits across their entire portfolio of 103,000 homes. So to fill these data gaps, they're needing to do far more manual boots on the ground surveys than is actually necessary, which is obviously very slow and very costly. So this got my co-founder Matt and I thinking, what if there were a blueprint showing how much heat all these buildings are losing and what to do to fix them. And it was really in thinking about this that we came up with Kestrix. So what does Kestrix do? Fundamentally, we map and quantify heat loss in buildings by applying AI to the rapid analysis of images, typically thermal drone images. And then we use these image inputs to basically generate retrofit plans, not just for single homes at a time, but at the scale of whole streets, whole neighborhoods, aspirationally whole cities at a time. So how does this actually work in practice? I always like to clarify that we are actually not a drone company. We're a software company that analyzes images that today happen to come from drones. So when we work with a customer, usually they'll send us a list of addresses. We've got a network of pilots all around the UK who basically scan that subset of buildings, sort of 30 to 60 meters, one flight during the day, one flight at night. We've then got AI algorithms that basically take those images, align them into 3D models, and then take those 3D models as a basis for assessing heat loss quantitatively. So for anyone with building physics background in the room, we're estimating U values and overall space heating demand intensity to get a real quantitative sense of how the building is performing. And that's without a reading of internal temperature. Lastly, we're pulling everything together into dashboards to basically help triage properties for retrofit and then verify retrofit outcomes, mostly for large social housing providers. Yeah, I think in this day and age of AI, it's always important to clarify what is really the efficiency here? What's the point? Basically, Kestrix's rapid interpretation of aerial imagery is A, non-invasive, so you do not need to go inside the house and bother residents, which is particularly useful for residential projects. And B is really fast. So our North Star here is to take the energy survey from something that's normally 2 to 3 hours of boots on the ground work to something that takes less than 1 minute, drone flying over the building, algorithm analyzing the outputs. And again, for any nerds in the room, we're doing this actually not through LLMs, but through a blend of AI for multimodal vision, physics-informed models, and recommender systems, which basically means we are training algorithms to pull numbers, data, and insights out of images, specifically thermal images. Yeah, and we've got a lot of really exciting early partnerships. We're working with 18 different social housing providers and major utilities across the UK. Including Clarion and Peabody, who are the first and third largest, as well as a bunch of London councils. Our largest project to date is a three-way collaboration between us, E.ON, and Coventry City Council, whereby we're scanning thousands of homes in Coventry with the aim of working towards a citywide heat loss map to help sort of inform their 15-year decarbonization strategy. Yeah, in terms of background, I think, yeah, we've been able to get this far because we've got a really great core team. By way of background myself, I spent most of my early career in the carbon accounting industry. So I had lots of customers, including real estate customers, who would say, we want to decarbonize, how do we do it? And over again, encountered this problem of bad data in, bad data out. So when I met my co-founder, Matt, who comes from 20 years of high-tech product leadership, with 10 years at Google, but who had struggled to retrofit his own house. And he said, what if we fly thermal drones to get the data ourselves? It really resonated. Yeah, we've also been lucky to receive lots of Innovate UK funding to sort of fund our core algorithmic development. So great sort of base tech team in-house. Yeah, we're just getting started. So we, yeah, in the past sort of year have been building our automation algorithms to accommodate sort of neighborhood scale mapping, but we're now at the point where we can start to take on much larger contracts. So it's going to be an exciting couple of years. Yeah, so leave you with this. Today we're helping social housing plan, price, verify retrofit, but really the goal is the Google Maps of heat loss. We want to democratize access to all the data we need to get all these buildings decarbonized. So I hope that provides a good overview. Thank you.
Well, there's an ambition for you. Very good. No, really good, great. So now turning to Chloe, who's got a business which falls into the third category of the technology categories that I mentioned, in that it's all about advanced materials. So over to you, Chloe.
Thank you. Yeah, so good evening. I'm Chloe. Yeah, I'm the managing director and co-founder of Natural Building Systems, and I have the pleasure of working at the intersection of kind of technology and physical materials. We have made a lot of progress when it comes to decarbonising buildings in terms of operational energy efficiency, but we're still a long way off the kind of predicted and required roadmaps to decarbonise the fabric of buildings, so the materials that go into them. And my background was more looking at community, voluntary organisations, and particularly farming. I'm from East Anglia, and my business partners are architects, material scientists, and a developer who were seeing the challenges with the built environment in terms of adopting more low carbon materials. And basically we started with this hypothesis that the materials exist to deliver not just the sustainability outcomes, but also better fabric efficiency in terms of moisture management and thermal performance. And the technology exists, but actually trying to combine those two things is where we've decided to kind of focus our energy. And the benefit of our approach is that we didn't inherit a kind of legacy system. We were effectively coming at this with a blank sheet of paper to try and explore how we could use the technology that already exists to enable us to deliver more sustainable and low carbon materials at a scale that could actually be adopted. You know, it's all lovely when you see the kind of grand designs and the earth buildings and nice, you know, high-end aesthetic architectural stuff, but that's a long way from the kind of, you know, developer-led model that the rest of the construction industry uses. So we are working at the intersection of those two spaces, and what we've ended up developing is a kit of parts that's called Adept. And Adept is basically a structural panel system filled with hemp-based insulation materials. But crucially, we are utilizing precision engineering and basically digital technology to enable us to deliver those materials at a cost competitive price, but also in a kind of way that mitigates some of the risks and concerns around using natural materials, which is often durability, fire, you know, those kind of understandable concerns. So the idea is that it's a pre-engineered kit that can help address that because it comes pre-tested, certified with warranties, etc. But actually what we ended up doing was developing a smaller format panel system. So anyone that's familiar with the modular industry will be aware that the kind of category 1 modular that was hailed as the savior of construction efficiency didn't really in the end deliver on those promises in terms of category 1 is where they took the process of building a house and they basically dropped it into a factory environment. So often they'd be building big volumes that then have to get taken to site, and the logistics and the kind of complexity there meant that ultimately it didn't necessarily deliver the cost savings that it was meant to. And it was fundamentally using the same materials and the same kind of labor and skills, but in a building with lots of high overheads. And so for me, it's kind of no surprise that that didn't necessarily translate to the benefits that they had hoped. But I think what we're seeing now is the evolution of the next generation of modular, which is about kit of parts. And so we've developed a much smaller panelized solution. And the idea is that we can standardize the panels rather than the building. So you can use a panel to build any building, and you can also use it to make it adaptable. But ultimately for me, and with my background in the more kind of youth sector and community development angle, this is about linking the potential for house building to have knock-on benefits for particularly rural communities. My background and my family were farmers in East Anglia, and lots of farms in that region are diversifying away from farming towards energy crops or solar panels or glamping sites or whatever it is. But actually fundamentally land use and farming are no longer really able to generate the revenues to support these farms. So the crop that really captured my imagination was industrial hemp. It has a myriad of benefits on the agricultural side, but crucially, it has unique performance characteristics as a building material that mean that it can basically help buffer internal humidity, reduce damp and mold, and have buildings that are more resilient to overheating. But I think the thing that captured my imagination and the reason why I then have gone down the route of developing this business is the idea that we could relocalize the concept of construction and house building and actually have regional or at least more local factories manufacturing panels that can then be used to create local housing. So you're keeping that value in the local economy. Many people, anyone in the construction space will know that we import the vast majority of construction materials. We already import over 70% of timber, etc. And so it's about trying to develop a kind of whole value chain model. So we've delivered a whole wide range of projects over the last 3 years, really, since we got out of the kind of 2 years of really intensive R&D. Started out with garden studios and small projects, but more recently we've done our first residential bungalow, and we've done a 2-story house and extensions and various other things. And we're now working on some really exciting projects. We've got a pilot for an arch with Places for London that will be on site in the next couple of weeks. And we've been doing quite a lot of classrooms and things. But I guess one of the reasons why I was really excited to come and talk today is that we haven't necessarily developed a technology solution. We have patents for the materials and we have patents for the kit of parts approach, but actually we're able to plug in the technology platforms that exist within the industry. And that's something that we're really excited about going forward. So one of the things we're working on at the moment is developing a range of off-the-shelf products that basically can be reconfigured. So, you know, the kind of kitchen, IKEA, kit of parts approach. This is something we can link in with our manufacturing ERP system. We're very much, I think, by virtue of being a kind of millennial-led business, like just the use of technology and how we utilize data within the business is just something that, like I say, having a blank sheet of paper was, I think, quite useful for us. So the idea that we can streamline the workflow for an architect, basically to be able to integrate, either upload or model their projects within a platform that then links to the manufacturing side of it. And then the other thing is the panels are also designed for disassembly. So they're joined with a timber peg. That means they can be installed rapidly, but they can also be taken apart again. And that unlocks all of these interesting questions around material passports, traceability, kind of. So each panel has a digital and physical RFID tag within it, which means we can track it throughout its lifespan. And ultimately we can build that into, hopefully in the future, asset tracking and management solutions, and also circular economy, reverse logistics platforms and things. So there's all kinds of intersections. And yeah, I guess we are looking at scaling up our manufacturing. At the moment, we've got a factory in the east of England. The goal is to have these like micro factories, so about 100 home scale, not to go for these like, you know, 1,000+ homes a year. But yeah, I think that's pretty much us. This is just a nice picture of a project that's in planning at the moment.
Brilliant. Great.
Thank you.
So I suppose the question is, do you live in one?
Not yet. that would be the goal.
Great. I'm finally going to pass on to Theresa, who, as I mentioned, is a dispute resolution lawyer here at Watson Farley, at the sharp end when things go wrong, it seems to me. So I think you're going to give us a few examples of the sorts of disputes that you've come across and why, and to some extent where technology might come in to all of that, to help us to solve some of this, perhaps before it happens.
Yeah, well, hopefully. Thank you very much, Annette and everyone. Thank you so much for your contributions. I've actually got a trial coming up in March, and I'm sort of sitting here listening to this thinking, I wish I'd met you all about 2 years ago. But, you know, we've met now. So as I say, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. At Watson Farley, our construction and infrastructure practice is varied. And as you can imagine, we're dealing with risk management and disputes involving things like offshore renewable energy projects, high voltage underground cables, historic and complex residential projects, lots and lots of building safety issues, lots of issues around cladding, transport infrastructure like bridges or airports, and that will typically involve lots and lots of data. Any project that we're dealing with will have issues around costs, delays to the works, defects, and all of that will involve poring over documents and looking at in detail at lots of different forms of data. So as you've heard from the panel already, anything that can capture or record or give us information around buildings is extremely valuable to us. And as a fellow millennial, we can remember very clearly the bad old days when, believe it or not, the way you'd find records of clients' projects would be going to some sort of shipping container in the dark and messing around in there trying to get photocopies. And when you look back at the way these things were managed before, a typical construction dispute could involve hundreds, if not 200, 300 files of paper that would be updated each day of trial. I mean, look back, it's absolutely ridiculous what used to go on. And so I would say technology has been transformative in terms of not just risk management and live projects and advising clients as we go along, but also in terms of actually resolving disputes quickly and cost effectively. So in terms of exactly what we're looking at, well, that will comprise things like construction contracts, orders, drawings, plans, programs, emails, thousands of texts, and the amount of documents on any given project can run into hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And understanding what's key in any dispute and the real issues and how to resolve it can be time-consuming, laborious, and a very expensive exercise. And what we're talking about is hundreds of thousands of pounds just to even go through the data. That's typically what used to be a big problem. And this means that projects are delayed. It means parties can't actually afford to take things to disputes, which of course is incredibly important. A lot of smaller contractors and SMEs can't chase payments because they just can't afford to run these disputes. And worst case scenario, we were talking about this actually beforehand, a lot of parties are pushed into insolvency because of it. We've also seen that in the building safety space, the building safety regulator will also take an interventionist stance. So it won't be possible to plead ignorance or step back from the process. Construction can actually be stopped in its tracks and remediation ordered. So it's actually got a lot worse in that sense, in that you can't just opt in or out of actually having these disputes. The regulator will actually step in and say, right, we're going to deal with this right now. Where are your records? Where is this golden thread of information you're supposed to be keeping? So as you can see, technology and using all forms of tech has and is so essential to resolving these problems. And it's been growing in abundance, whether as lawyers want to admit it or not. I was at a roundtable about AI not so long ago, and hilariously, the lawyers were saying they didn't use AI. Well, that's complete nonsense. We sort of said, well, have you Googled anything today? Have you searched anything today? Of course you're using it all the time. And we are. And it's actually night and day in terms of dealing with things. So for example, a junior lawyer's life might have been, 20 years ago, spending weeks raking through hard copy documents, trying to find the smoking gun, trying to find the relevant documents, trying to even understand what the contract is. Now we can use platforms that can find this information in seconds. I could literally type into one of the very commonly used legal platforms that host documents, find me the first email I ever sent to Annette. It will come back in seconds instead of someone looking through the documents. So the way that our jobs are, what we actually do has been transformed, allowing your sort of professional services people to actually use their headspace to think strategically, think how are we going to resolve this dispute? How are we going to avoid these disputes instead of spending so much time just raking through the information? This is also really important with risk, because one of the problems we've got, particularly with historic projects where you've got multiple PDFs on random laptops, all sorts of different data scattered everywhere, is advising parties on risk. So you might end up in a settlement meeting, but both parties are posturing because actually no one really knows. And it takes so long to actually get the data through disclosure or some other court-ordered or tribunal-ordered process that actually you're not really advising your clients on risk because you haven't seen the document. So you don't even know what the risk is really. That's a terrible way for these things to be managed. With the use of AI tools and the use of platforms, we can actually say to the client, look, actually, you stuffed on that point, settle that quickly, or run it. So it gives clients options. And also things like just comparing regulations. So, any of you construction professionals will know this. We often have a debate over, well, which regulations were in place at the time? What was the relevant regs? What should we have been doing? Who was the principal designer? All that sort of stuff. These are even the most basic online tools can compare those documents and show you the differences and show you what's important and do that in seconds. Again, a task that used to take hours will now take seconds. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think it's essential. It's a very positive thing in many ways, and we're using it in abundance. And I really think it could be used as a force for good. Now there is, other elements to this. So we can now store documents with ease, increasingly important in terms of longevity, and certainly with the building safety reforms, the limitation periods that you're required to adhere to now. So in terms of the length of time there is for someone to bring a claim, that's much, much longer than it ever was before because of the retrospective effect of this legislation. So you actually do need to store these documents and store this data. It not only needs to reflect the building in a live fashion, but it also has to be there for many years after. So that's really good. And also we can retrieve and locate documents very quickly. So that's very good. But there's also another side to this. So the use of legal tech is now appearing in a live dispute context. So not just in terms of hosting, retrieving and looking at information, it's actually being used for submissions, for negotiating contracts, there are tools actually that entirely run disputes using AI in the States that are being used at an increasing rate, basically. They've trialed this many times actually, and it looks like it could come here very soon. There are drawbacks to that. So one of the things that you may have read about are things like hallucinations, fake case names. You've probably all heard of the lawyer that used AI to produce some submissions, and what happened was the AI tool used conflated case names, some famous cases, and they were all, obviously the joining of it meant they were all fake. And it has that people-pleasing tendency. So the person in question was trying to find cases on particular points, and AI thinking it was being helpful, was sort of pushing forward this information, which of course was all inaccurate and not actually legal cases or proper legal authority. So that can have very serious consequences. Another thing that I'm finding with some of my disputes is some parties are going to consultants who are entirely using ChatGPT to draft submissions in response. One of my colleagues, Megan's in the audience, she actually spotted this on one of the cases. And the problem with that is not only are you getting a load of garbage back and a lot of repetitive submissions, but also they're putting the confidential information out there in processes that are meant to be confidential. Another thing is that there is a quantitative sort of data bias that we're finding with these submissions too. So, for example, if you've got an expert report that's 50 pages and an expert report that's 10, the AI tools like the one that's got 50 pages because the amount of data it's receiving in a particular way, rather than looking at the merits or the quality. So we do find that also happens when parties use your sort of free online resources to prepare their submissions. There is also the risk that adjudicators, arbitrators, and judges are using AI to assist them in decision making. Now, there are guidance notes that explain how this should or shouldn't happen, but we are becoming increasingly aware of, certainly not the High Court, but certainly the lower forms of dispute resolution. That is an increasing possibility. And again, there are the inherent risks with that. So are they relying on tools that have these queries over data bias, accuracy, sharing confidential information? Are they protected? All of that stuff. So there are, there are challenging times ahead, but I would certainly say that in terms of legal tech, it is a really good thing for the construction industry. It could improve efficiency, and it certainly could save money.
Well, there we go. And it's all happened so quickly.
Very well. Well, I feel like it's quick, but then I think, is it that quick? But yeah, I think certainly it's accelerating. Yeah,
to me, like it's happening pretty quickly. Very, very interesting. Well, that was a brilliant set of vignettes of the various businesses. I'm going to start off with just a question, essentially to the 4 business owners, which is that each of you has something really interesting, unique, but it's a small business. How do you make an impact in this big world of construction, which seems to be, certainly from my perspective, dominated by the large construction companies that we see all over London and other very large organizations that own lots of buildings? How do you make any impact? So where do we start? Let's start this way. Let's start with Brittany.
It's a really interesting question. I think one of the most beautiful things about sort of software and technology is that it's scalable without having to have lots of humans. And so actually, although we're a small business in the sense that, we're just under 50 people at the moment, we are able to work with some of the biggest construction companies in the UK. And so we're still servicing the scale of clients that are having significant impact. So for example, we work with Scottish Power, and they obviously have this huge reach across the north of the UK. We work with High Speed 2, we work with some of the national highways projects. So you don't have to be a big company to actually have a huge impact on the footprint of construction. We also, although we're headquartered in the UK, we operate in the US, we operate in Australia, weirdly, and also Canada and Central Europe. So all from this sort of small British hub hiding out in Borough Market, we're able to sort of have global domination, which is great fun. And I actually think that's one of the really lovely, unique things about technology. I think the other part of it was that sort of final point I made around integrations and being part of an ecosystem. So not trying to solve all problems at once and not trying to be everything to everyone, but finding your critical niche where you can really, really add value and really make an impact, and then partnering with the others who have already had that scale and that reach. So someone mentioned earlier that we just took investment from Autodesk. Now they are the biggest, most established engineering and construction technology company in the world. They have global reach. They've spent decades building up this sort of web of clients. Now, obviously, we're not immediately leveraging their entire go-to-market, I wish. But by sort of building those partnerships and by building those integrations, we're able to have a far, far greater impact than our sort of tiny company scale could deliver on its own. And so finding those ecosystems, being part of an ecosystem and finding those partnerships is so critical to delivering absolutely unreasonable and unjustified impact.
A good answer. Is that also true, Sakthy, of your sort of business?
Yeah, I mean, we echo a lot of the like similar learnings. I was just thinking about what else we've learned on our side, and I think some of it is, yeah, not in addition to not only not trying to be everything, but also like understanding where your strengths are and where your partnerships are. I think I think especially with the smaller tech companies, a lot of us have this kind of vision of where the industry should be. Yes. We know it's not going to get there if we just let everyone do status quo. And so a lot of us are quite motivated to be like, well, maybe we can help, like we can support each other a little bit, right? And you know, like for example, none of these are competitive companies, and we all have access to quite a lot of different asset owners. And so something we might talk, might share, and you know, make introductions and things like that. So I think that's part of like the community of people trying to change the system. Is one thing, and then the other one is I was just thinking in my head about how, as you were saying, the world's changed quite quickly, and even like 5 years ago, the way new companies started and how investors viewed things and the types of models and things, that's all kind of flipped on its head now. Like a lot of what we were originally starting around thinking about as a business, you know, as a SaaS model, as all these sorts of things, for us don't make so much sense to the kinds of people we're trying to sell to anymore. And a lot of it is that, you know, they don't want to buy another like piece of software and another piece of software and another piece of software. They want things that integrate all together. So as you said, if you can start using your network and figuring out how you integrate and how you fit and how your piece fits within the rest, you can start opening quite a lot of doors and putting pieces together.
That's interesting. Do you think, though, that you get competition between the types of the partners that you're trying to get involved with, so that you end up having to choose, if you like, a particular avenue? And I mean, that's also true, I think, for Qflow. Are you likely to get sucked into one particular set of partners or partnerships that won't allow your solution then to become ubiquitous across the whole industry? Do you think that's a danger for you?
I mean, for us, we're quite spread out with the types of clients and the types of things that we do. So we don't tend to encounter, yeah, and it's quite hard for someone to say, no, don't provide data feeds. You know, like it's too broad for someone to kind of pigeonhole a little bit. And yeah, and then we have, I mean, especially for what we do, there's this global reach, right? So we have projects in the UK, we have projects in Guyana, like, so there's just quite a lot of open market and a lot of built environment to go after.
Yeah, I was about to say, there's a lot for you to go for, which is really interesting. Let me throw it open to the floor for a bit and see what sort of questions we have out there, which I'm sure there are quite a few.
Just want to say thank you for the amazing panel discussion. It's incredibly interesting topics. I just had a quick question for Lucy and the drone image mapping. And I was just wondering, how do you envision the future for democratizing the information of heat mapping for the average consumer?
For the average consumer rather than the average asset owner? Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So, yeah, I mean, I think we had to make a decision pretty early on. Are we going to build a product that helps large landlords understand what they need to do, how much it's going to cost, and then once it's in, whether it's actually working, versus build a product that helps consumers understand their own journey? I think when we started the company in 2022, the energy costs were a lot higher. So it wasn't a totally obvious fork in the road, but we sort of had the rationale of, okay, today the average consumer cares about insulation because their energy bills are through the roof, no pun intended. But yeah, but I think we also foresaw that if that changed, people just don't care. And that's the unfortunate reality with retrofit and energy efficiency, even if you can make it stack up financially, which depends on the cost of energy. People just don't have time to think about, should I insulate my house? I mean, I'm a renter. I can't insulate my house. I could, if I really wanted to, ask my landlord if I could spend a bunch of money insulating their house, but just no one's going to do that. So yeah, we really tried to focus on, okay, who has the problem, who has the pain point, who is going to lose money if we don't solve this problem now. Yeah, I hope that sort of answers your question. And that for us was the social housing providers. Basically, they've got lots of money from the government, very limited time to spend it, very little idea about what's going on. And so we solve that problem, which has a kind of a cost ROI, I suppose. But I want to get it into consumers' hands. I mean, we've done a couple of trials, like with Islington Council, for example. The whole trial was, can we scan a bunch of houses and then give everyone a heat map? But we found that in that process that we had to become like a consumer marketing company, which we just, designing mail postcards and QR codes. And it was really hard. I'm not going to lie. Like, people are not engaged with the topic, which just really makes it difficult.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you.
Any other questions at this stage?
As founders, I admire all of you for taking the step to get into the business and take the leap forward to set up your own companies. As people who are underrepresented in the industry, what advice would you give to other people who are thinking of doing the same thing and going for it?
I'm happy to jump in on that. Yeah, I think for me, actually, and I'm probably unlike the other panelists, I don't have an industry background. So obviously working in the industry and being immersed in the problems or the challenges that are there, and then being able to come up with an idea or a solution, I think if you have the insight to be able to do that, and that's fantastic. But I also think a little naivety goes a long way, because if I, knowing what I know now, and I was starting again, would I have developed like a whole building envelope structural insulated kit? Like, it's basically, I'm very envious of anyone doing software. Obviously it has its own challenges, but even within the fabric space, like the amount of early challenges and things of people being like, why don't you just make a new brick? Why don't you just make it like, take what's already there and then do it a little bit better. Because for me, the motivation was about wanting to actually show that there is a different way of doing it, wanting to be able to explore this intersection of engineering and science and materials and physics and all of that. Like, I guess the process of having a startup, like that initial early discovery process, in my opinion, is like the most fun bit of it. And nothing says that just because you start that process that you have to start your own business. I think probably most of us probably explored a couple of different ideas before we landed on where we're at. And so I think it's just, if you're someone who's motivated, who likes a challenge, who wants to have an impact, the construction sector and the built environment are just absolutely ripe for it. So you don't need a certificate or a piece of paper to get on with it.
Okay, well, what would you say to that? Would you do it again?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of challenges. I also had a kid in the middle of it, and so much.
There's another little challenge.
Yeah, I know. Both two babies, like balancing both of them was challenging. No, thinking about that the idea of naivety, and I think there's two ends of the spectrum, right? There's you have to find your people and your network, and you're not going to have everything, right? Especially as a founder, you're not going to be able to do everything, from the business aspects to the understanding the sector to all of these kinds of things. And I think prior to starting a business, it's just really quite important to talk to as many people as you can, hear founder stories. I mean, we're in a room full of people who come to network regularly, so you already do that kind of thing. But it is quite important, I think, to leverage the learnings from other people who have done it before. And there's so many things where I'm like, okay, in hindsight, I could have just avoided that mistake there, and I brought on board some people into the business that have like basically done, and they're like, oh yeah, we did all of that, but yeah, let's go down this way. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm glad you're here to tell me that now. But at the same time, if you listen to everybody who's done it before, then you end up with the construction mentality of we're just going to do it the same way before. So you kind of need both sides of that coin.
Yes, you need that freshness in order to move the thing forward. No, that's true. I think there was another question here. I won't get everybody to answer all the questions, but
hi, thank you so much for speaking. I think it was great to see all of your projects. One particular question for Theresa, like in regarding to AI and now who use AI, do you find that is a bit counterproductive in a way that sometimes it can be giving wrong information, or you trying to search for something is not giving what you actually really looking for or anything like that? Do you find that sometimes it can be quite frustrating to actually to deal with AI, even though probably I'll say like 60% of it like helps a lot, but like the other 30 or 40% of it like maybe like backs you up a little bit. Oh, I wish I have some junior here to help me out, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that the phase we're in now, it does require informed usage. So I think it's great for dare I say it, the older people in the office, more qualified, let's say, put it that way, because you know what you're looking for and you know what's wrong. I think if you were starting afresh as a newly qualified, it's potentially very dangerous, because you can find a lot of information that's very, as you're saying, wrong, mixed up, people pleasing, user pleasing, that kind of thing. But I think the challenge for us is when you're facing it in submissions. That's my biggest problem, when you get it and you're dealing with an opponent that's using it heavily, and it's throwing up, made up case names, legal authority that's mixed up with truth, some untruth. That kind of stuff is costly and time consuming. And yeah, you do worry that sometimes will the sector, with the more junior people in the sector, understand the limitations of how they should be using it and observe that. Because I've got a list of the cases that have come up in terms of junior lawyers using AI and getting caught out. And the consequences have been pretty serious. So yeah, it is a dangerous tool, but if you're sort of more experienced, you can immediately spot, well, hang on a minute, I know that's a construction case and they've used that party's name, and they've used that party's name, and they stuck them together and made up a case. So you can spot it. But yeah, and I think it's interesting, the more senior people seem to be open to it and able to use it, because certainly the way it's advanced is pretty rapid in the last, I would say, 2 years. But I would say in terms of legal research, if you're using the secure, reliable platforms, it's night and day in terms of the speed at which you can find answers. Interesting.
I think it's worth adding on that as well, that in that instance, we're talking specifically about these large language models, which is just one sort of niche of AI. And one thing that we're exploring internally is where we're using AI to do what we're calling design matching. So you have a delivery, where does that relate to the specification of the design, and are we confident that that delivery is actually in line, which was what was specified and required? We're actually putting in things like confidence levels. So the AI is 60% confident that this is a match, and that we feel like there's a risk here, but we put it back to the human who has that experience and that knowledge to say, okay, actually I've looked at it and I'm fine with that. And if the AI is 99% confidence, they might go, cool, not worried. If they're 20% confidence, they might be like, I'm not even going to look at the AI because it's complete gibberish. So by giving that extra layer of transparency and visibility behind what the AI is doing, where it's making changes in the data, where it has confidence, and how it's sort of trying to make those calls, ideally what we want to do is actually enable people to make better informed decisions, as opposed to just depend on the AI to do the things for them. So it's very much behaving as a co-pilot to whatever they're doing from a quality control and inspection process, instead of them just relying on it to give them the answers. So it's more about increasing their capacity and their capability, not replacing them or just doing it for them. So that there's nuances that I think, as the industry evolves and its relationship to AI evolves, it will become much better at finding that partnered relationship, whether you're very experienced or less experienced.
But if our clients were using what you're describing in your systems, we would have completely different prospects of how quickly we could advise, how quickly we could mismanage, Because, you know, when in 2017-18 we were involved in some of the first litigation around dangerous cladding on buildings, and you'd have, you know, 5 or 6 technical experts all arguing about the composition of an, you know, external wall system. As the lawyers in the room all know this, we've all suffered it. But, you know, that seems to me unbelievable. But, you know, if they'd had a system like Brittany's describing, we wouldn't be in that position. But
I think one of the funniest things about our industry, and one of the things I love about particularly Lucy's company is and Sakthy's is it's generating data from the ground up. And our industry has gone through these sort of waves of going, we've got all this data, we're drowning in data. And they're like, we're so excited, we're going to put it all in the AI and we're going to know everything. And the reality is the data is absolute crap, and it's locked in paper, it's locked in warehouses and filing cabinets, and back then half of it got burnt, so it still sat on a 3/4 inch floppy disk, if you remember what those were. And so actually the quality and the completeness of our data in this industry is mind-boggling poor. So when Grenfell happened and we went back and we said, where else is this cladding?
Nobody knew.
Nobody knew. They spent billions on invasive surveys to drill holes into cladding and try and figure out what the hell it was, because no one had those records. So there is also a bit of a reckoning coming for this industry, and it's already started to happen, where the sort of initial excitement and euphoria of having AI, it's going to solve all our problems, and you know, we're just going to ingest all this data. They're starting to realize that the quality of the data that we actually have on the ground is so bad. We have to go back to these ground source truths and actually say, well, how do we capture it from the very beginning in the right way, in an accessible, analyzable, high quality structure, so that we actually can answer these questions of what did I put on my building? So it's very funny seeing this evolution.
Yes, it's sort of going backwards to go forwards.
Yes,
that's essentially what you're having to do. I mean, one of the things I think is really interesting listening to the panel is how much AI has come up, but how much criticism there has been of the potential for AI to transform the industry. That we're not there yet. It's got lots and lots and lots of legs, but it desperately needs, as you say, the data cleansing piece underneath. I just wonder how much of what you're saying is being taken seriously at the higher echelons of the larger companies, or whether they just continue. Lucy.
Just to add to that, in my early career, I was always familiar with the term greenwashing, right? Like sustainable initiatives so that you look sustainable. I feel that AI washing is worse than greenwashing ever was. Like the degree to which companies just want to work with you so that they can post on social media that they're doing innovation in AI is mind-boggling. And actually, I think it's a real risk for companies, because there will be organizations who want to work with you so that they can talk about it. And I think particularly we struggle with this at Kestrix because, well, I think what we do is very cool, but it's very visual, you know, like it's easy to understand mapping heat loss with robotics and AI. And we've started having to ask customers the question, why? Why do you want to use this? Do you want to use this to solve a problem that's connected to cost? Or do you want to use this because you want to use AI and this seems like a good way to do it? Yeah, and I think, I think that's contributing across not just in the construction sector, but to like this AI bubble that, I mean.
It's really interesting to hear a company which might actually turn down a prospect.
I haven't done it.
You haven't done it.
I want to. I really want to. I'm starting to ask the questions. So
exactly. On a sort of, I suppose, a moral basis, if you like. I mean, that's giving it very big words, but that's an interesting idea. I wonder if that comes through because of the millennial characteristics of the way you approach business.
I think to your original question around, you know, how seriously a company is taking this, I think we see quite a spectrum from the still terrified of technology, don't touch it with a barge pole, to the tech AI washing in the middle, to those who have actually been over this sort of exploring technology, really understanding the pains that they're trying to solve, really understanding the root causes of those pains as well, to those that are actually taking this very seriously at a board level. And they're the kind of companies that have these sort of chief information officers, and they're getting really into the weeds of, how do we build a data lake? Where is all our data? What quality is our data? How accessible is it? Okay, where have we got gaps? How do we fill that? And I think we almost have the opposite problem as Lucy, is that what we do is deeply unsexy. And there is nothing attractive about what Qflow produces, really, because the real core value of Qflow is in that granularity and that accuracy of that data. Now, we do make some pretty dashboards, and we do provide some pretty exciting alerts sometimes. But the reality is we don't produce these sort of beautiful, colourful graphics that people can sort of put on their website and go, look how amazing we are. And it's really at those companies that are at that sort of higher end of what I would call like digital maturity or data literacy that we end up working with. But they've gone through those sorts of pain processes of being terrified, greenwashing, then realizing that doesn't actually drive business value. It doesn't drive profits. It doesn't actually drive customer satisfaction. And so they end up in the same place they were back here. And then actually doing the hard work of really understanding fundamentally what's broken, what am I trying to solve? What have I got that actually means I can solve it today? And then what am I missing? And that's where technology comes in, and it says, okay, I can fill the gap that you've got, and I can help you actually solve the problem that you have. So that's where we sort of find the more progressive.
Really interesting. We're more or less running out of time, aren't we? So I think continue the discussions over drinks. Really interesting. I think it just remains for me to thank the panelists and for you all to thank the panelists. So thank you really very much.